It was just after midnight on May 14th, 2008, when 19-year-old Brandon Swanson vanished into the night. He was driving home from a small celebration with classmates. He wasn't intoxicated. He wasn't in a high-crime area. He was on the phone with his parents, calmly describing his surroundings. They stayed on the line for nearly an hour while they searched for him, until suddenly, the line went silent, and Brandon was gone. To this day, he's never been seen again. This is the haunting case of Brandon Swanson, and it remains a cold case. Brandon Swanson was a typical 19-year-old from Marshall, Minnesota. A good student, friendly, independent. That spring, he'd completed a year at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. On the evening of May 13th, he went to celebrate the end of the semester with a few friends in the nearby town of Canby. By all accounts, the gathering was low-key. A few drinks were involved, but nothing excessive. Brandon's blood alcohol level later became a point of speculation, but friends said he seemed sober when he left. Around midnight, Brandon got in his green Chevy Lumina and began the 30-mile drive back home to Marshall. Somewhere along the way, something went wrong. Just before 1:30 a.m., Brandon's car veered off a gravel road and landed in a shallow ditch. He tried to drive out, but the tires spun uselessly. He wasn't hurt, the car wasn't damaged, but he was stuck. Rather than panic, Brandon did something logical. He pulled out his phone and called his parents. He told them he was near the town of Lind, a small rural area southwest of Marshall. He wasn't sure exactly where, but said he could see lights in the distance. He assumed they were from Lind. His parents, Brian and Annette Swanson, got in their truck and drove out to find him. For the next 47 minutes, Brandon stayed on the phone with them. He described landmarks. He flashed his car's lights. They drove up and down gravel roads, trying to find each other. But strangely, no matter where they went, they couldn't spot him. Eventually, Brandon said he was tired of waiting. He told them he'd start walking toward the town he believed was Lind, and they could meet him there. He walked while staying on the phone. He didn't seem scared, just frustrated. Annette later said, "He sounded just like he always did." And then, without warning, Brandon suddenly said, "Oh, shh," and the line went dead. His parents tried calling back, dozens of times, no answer. They drove up and down the roads for hours. At 6:30 a.m., with no sign of Brandon, they called the police. What happened next deepened the mystery. Using cell phone pings, authorities discovered that Brandon had not been near Lind when he crashed. In fact, he'd been 25 miles northwest, near the town of Taunton. He had been completely turned around. His car was eventually found off a gravel road just outside Taunton. It was neatly parked along a field. There were no signs of damage, no evidence of a struggle, and no footprints leading away. Search dogs later traced Brandon's scent from the car to the edge of a nearby field, then toward a wooded area along the Yellow Medicine River. The dogs seemed to follow a trail across the river and up the opposite bank before the scent abruptly stopped. Divers searched the river. Police scoured the area. Helicopters, horses, drones, nothing turned up. Brandon had simply vanished. There were no signs of foul play, no dropped phone, no clothing, no wallet. No one reported seeing a young man walking the road that night. And there were no new leads in the days, months, or even years that followed. One theory suggested he fell into the river and drowned. But no body has ever been found, despite years of intensive searches. His phone was never recovered. And there's been no activity on his bank accounts or social media. His parents, devastated but determined, pushed for change. In the months following Brandon's disappearance, they discovered a disturbing gap in Minnesota law. Police weren't initially helpful because Brandon was 19, an adult. Authorities delayed acting on the missing persons report, assuming he'd just wandered off or needed space. As a result, Brandon's family helped pass Brandon's Law in 2009, which requires law enforcement to immediately begin investigations on missing adults under suspicious circumstances. No waiting period allowed. Thanks to them, dozens of other families may never face the same indifference. Today, Brandon Swanson remains missing. No new clues, no eyewitnesses, no conclusions. A 19-year-old man walking along a rural Minnesota road, speaking calmly with his parents. And then, silence. What did he see in those final moments? Was it an animal, an accident, or something far worse? How can someone just disappear mid-call without a trace? More than a decade later, those questions remain unanswered. This was the case of Brandon Swanson,